China has appealed for calm after the United States said it had detected a Chinese surveillance balloon flying at high altitude over the state of Montana, which is home to sensitive nuclear sites. The Chinese Foreign Ministry said it was investigating.
The Chinese Foreign Ministry said that it was working to verify the situation, adding that China had no intention of violating the airspace of any other country. Stephen McDonnell is our correspondent in Beijing.
This is a very strange new point of tension between Washington and Beijing, which has come just days before US Secretary of State Antony Blinken is due here in the Chinese capital for talks which were designed to ease tensions, to mend relations between the world's two superpowers. And yet we have this balloon, allegedly a Chinese spy balloon, flying over North America. Now, the Chinese Foreign Ministry has said that it is still attempting to verify whether it's one of its own, to try and work out what's going on. And we had the Foreign Ministry spokesperson here warning against artificial hype in terms of how this is to be considered, because she said that that would not bring about a solution to this current problem. But you know, who knew that spy balloons were even a thing at the moment? You know, you have satellite technology, you have advanced aircraft. Why still use these balloons? What they bring to the table, I'm not quite sure. And yet, although, according to officials in the US, this balloon isn't posing any danger because it's flying at an altitude above commercial aircraft. So they're saying at the moment it can't hurt anyone or hurt anything. And yet there must be great temptation in the US to bring it down and have a look at it. However, you'd love to be a fly on the wall when Antony Blinken meets senior Chinese officials, including potentially even Xi Jinping, the leader of the country.
The US Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, has called off a planned trip to Beijing, saying the presence of the balloon in American airspace was unacceptable. Chinese officials have said it was just a weather balloon which drifted off course.
Japan's Prime Minister Fumio Kishida has sacked one of his most senior advisors, his media secretary Masayoshi Arai. He was condemned for making discriminatory remarks about sexual minorities and same-sex marriage during an off-the-record briefing. Ben Lowings reports.
Masayoshi Arai said he couldn't look at LGBT couples. He wouldn't want them living next door, and people would flee Japan if same-sex marriage was allowed. He's retracted the comments and apologized.
Pakistan's telecom regulator has blocked Wikipedia, saying it had failed to remove blasphemous content despite warnings. A spokesman said the decision could be reviewed if the online encyclopedia deleted what he called sacrilegious information. The US-based Wikimedia Foundation said the ban had denied the world's fifth most populous nation of access to the largest repository of free knowledge. Ukraine and Russia have carried out their latest prisoner swap, the second of the year so far. Kyiv says 116 of its soldiers and security forces were released. Moscow says 63 of its servicemen have been returned. Pope Francis has told members of the clergy in South Sudan that they cannot remain neutral, but must raise their voices against injustice and the abuse of power. He was speaking to Catholic bishops, priests and nuns in a cathedral in Juba on the first full day of a peace mission by 3 Christian leaders. South Sudan has been racked by civil war and ethnic violence since it became independent in 2011. East African leaders have gathered in Burundi to discuss the escalating conflict in the east of the Democratic Republic of Congo. Hundreds of people have been killed and hundreds of thousands have fled their homes following months of fighting in the mineral-rich region. Emmanuel Igunza reports.
The meeting of heads of state from the East Africa community comes as fighting intensifies in the North Kivu region. The violence is blamed on the M23 armed group, which has in recent weeks captured towns and cities in the east of DR Congo. The group has been accused of violating a ceasefire meant to facilitate talks to end the violence. Rising tensions between the DR Congo and neighboring Rwanda will also be on the agenda during the emergency summit.
South Korean prosecutors have charged a businessman with illegally sending $8 million to North Korea. They accuse Kim Sung-tae of using part of the money to help fund a planned visit to the north by the then governor of Gyeonggi province. Reports say investigators are probing whether the payment was made to secure preferential treatment from the province for Mr. Kim's business dealings with North Korea. Wildlife officials in Indonesia have captured a Sumatran tiger that's believed to have attacked and wounded several farmers. The critically endangered cat walked into a trap set in a forest reserve. It was found to have a number of wounds on its body. Conservation officials said the tiger would be treated for its injuries and released into a nearby national park once it had recovered.
A court in Kenya has sentenced to death a former policeman for the killing of a prominent human rights lawyer and 2 other people. The murder occurred 7 years ago. Emmanuel Legunza reports from Nairobi.
The judge described his actions as brutal and premeditated. His 2 colleagues and a civilian will serve prison sentences of between 39 and 15 years. They were all found guilty of 3 counts of murder for the killing of prominent lawyer Willie Kimani, his client and a taxi driver whose badly mutilated bodies were discovered weeks later, dumped in a river on the outskirts of the capital, Nairobi.
The Pakistani Prime Minister says the economy is facing an unimaginable situation. His comment came as foreign currency reserves dropped to a level barely enough to cover 3 weeks of imports. Shehbaz Sharif said a visiting IMF delegation was giving a very tough time over unlocking stalled funding from a $7 billion bailout. An Afghan professor who's been demanding education for women has been arrested by the Taliban authorities. He was detained as he was distributing books on the streets of Kabul. Yogita Lamayo reports.
Professor Ismail Mashal ran a private university in Kabul and came into the spotlight when he tore up his academic records live on television, protesting against the Taliban's ban on university and secondary school education for women and girls. Last month, he'd spoken to the BBC, saying Afghan men must stand up for the rights of women. Eyewitnesses say Professor Mashal was slapped, punched, and kicked by Taliban security personnel before he was detained.
The president of the Federated States of Micronesia says he's no longer worried about Japan dumping 1 million tons of treated wastewater from the wrecked Fukushima nuclear plant into the Pacific Ocean. David Panuello said he trusted Japan's technological capabilities. His comments, while on a visit to Tokyo, are an about-turn from one of the plan's biggest former critics.
Here in the UK, a man who said that he wanted to kill the Queen has pleaded guilty to treason. On Christmas Day in 2021, Jaswant Singh Chahil, who was armed with a loaded crossbow, managed to get into a private area of Windsor Castle where the Queen was in residence. The BBC's Daniel Sanford is on the line now. Daniel, tell us what Jaswant Singh Chahil did.
Well, this morning he appeared by video link from a high-security mental hospital called Broadmoor at the Central Criminal Court, which is the main court in central London where all the most high-profile cases are heard. And he pleaded guilty via video link to this offence of intending to injure the Queen, which is an offence under the Treason Act of 1842, of possessing an offensive weapon and also making threats to kill, that he was there to kill the Queen, as he put it. He was wearing this strange mask, which has been described as like a mask from a vigilante movie, and then after that he was assessed and taken off to a couple of these mental health units.
And Daniel, did we get any indication from him as to why he said he wanted to kill the late Queen?
Yes, indeed. He had posted a video which he recorded about 4 days earlier, just in the minutes before his arrest, onto the social media app Snapchat. And in that, he makes it quite clear what his intention was. He says, "I'm sorry for what I've done and what I will do. I will attempt to assassinate Elizabeth, Queen of the Royal Family. This is revenge for those who've died in the 1919 Jallianwala Bagh massacre." Now, that's a very infamous massacre in Amritsar in 1919, in which the British Army opened fire on protesters and hundreds of people were killed. Some people say up to as many as 1,000. So that was the justification that he gave for his actions. And he was also carrying a note on him that morning saying, "Please don't remove my clothes, shoes, gloves, mask, etc. I don't want a post-mortem. I don't want embalming. Thank you, and I'm sorry." So from that, it sounds as if he had expected that he might be killed in the act, but clearly, actually, when it came to it, when challenged by the police officer, he just had meekly surrendered.
Australian drug regulators have approved the use of the psychedelic substances MDMA and psilocybin for some cases of depression and post-traumatic stress disorder. Officials said trials found that when properly administered by psychiatrists, the prohibited drugs could induce a beneficial altered state of consciousness for some patients. A researcher at the University of South Australia, Mike Musker, said it held out hope for many people.